Journalism and writing have a lot of things in common. Newspaper journalism, especially, gives you a solid grounding in different kinds of writing styles. Trust me, guys, you would relate to what I'm saying if you have ever worked with a newspaper as a journalist or simply written articles for them. Newspaper journalism gives you a solid grounding in literary writing, long form writing. So, tomorrow, if you plan to write a novel or a travelogue or memoir, if you've ever done newspaper journalism, that's going to be extremely handy in your writing journey. How many times have you heard this advice that you should regularly read newspapers, you should get into the habit of reading newspapers and magazines to improve your vocabulary, linguistic skills, and just generally improve your ability to express yourself through writing? Probably many times. Although times have changed now and the popularity of the internet and the popularity of the digital medium has kind of impacted the popularity of the good old newspapers negatively, we are reading more on the internet now and not really reading that much in print, of course, but the basics still pretty much remains the same. And that's why perhaps it's no secret that many of the world famous authors, many of the world famous novelists have also been great journalists of their times. Hi guys, this is Rati here. Welcome back to my channel. So this is a whole series in which I'm going to talk about famous writer journalists of all times, famous author journalists, world famous writers who have also been journalists in their times, and I'm going to just take one author per episode. So this is the first episode of the series, and in this episode I'm going to talk about the world famous English author Charles Dickens. Probably not many of you are aware that the famous English author Charles Dickens was also a seasoned journalist. So in this episode, like I said, we're going to talk about the journalistic journey of Charles Dickens and how that impacted his writing. Dickens, known for his famous works such as David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, The Old Curiosity Shop, Hard Times, The Christmas Carol, Great Expectations, The Pickwick Papers, etc. Now, Dickens, one of the most famous authors, novelists of all times, is of course hugely admired for his unique writing styles, his unique storytelling skills and abilities. If you have read Dickens' works, you would notice that there's a lot of description in there, a lot of descriptive language is used, but there's also a lot of symbolism, a lot of allegory, and the use of satire in Dickens' works. So that, of course, is impacted by his journalistic experience, but also there's one more important aspect of Dickens' work, which is that unlike many novelists of his times, Dickens was writing in a way Dickens was portraying the lives of the English working class. He was portraying the lives of the poor, the downtrodden, and the marginalized people who were living on the margins of the English society. That's a unique feature we find in Dickens' novels, that the acute class conflict, the class conflict feature of the English societies, the realities of that are presented very well, are satirized in Dickens' works, his novels. Like I said, many of you might not know that Dickens was in fact an accomplished journalist, and long before he started writing those famous novels, he was pretty active in journalism. Now, Dickens' family found itself into impoverished circumstances. It found itself into pretty hard times when he was just 15. So Dickens had to leave school to look for a job, and his first job was as a solicitor's clerk. However, he found the work monotonous, and Dickens realized he was not really cut out for a lawyer's job, was not really interested, not keen on becoming a lawyer. So he kind of left that job and then gradually found his way towards journalism. Now, the story behind Dickens' journalistic foray, that how Dickens became a journalistic, is also pretty interesting. What actually happened was that Dickens had to learn a certain kind of shorthand for a particular job that he had to do. So apparently that shorthand course was of a variety that people took 3 years to learn that shorthand. But Dickens, because of his razor-sharp intelligence and his razor-sharp memory, apparently learned the shortened course in barely 3 months, and that's how he landed his first job as a reporter. So then he got some work with a newspaper called the Mirror of Parliament, and this was the beginning of his journey as a journalist, as a parliamentary reporter to be precise. Dickens carved quite a name for himself in the niche of parliamentary reporting and did this kind of reporting for many newspapers of his time. But we can say his big break, so to say, in journalism came when he became the reporter for a leading daily newspaper called Morning Chronicle, doing parliamentary reporting again. Now, besides being a newspaper reporter, Dickens is also known for starting running and editing many of the prominent weekly magazines of his times. Now, these weekly magazines were an interesting feature of the journalism of those times, and these were not typical journalism magazines, but rather a mix of different kinds of writing pieces. So it included, journalistic pieces, that is reportage, essays, memoirs, poetry, fiction, reflections, commentary, satire. So really a medley of different kinds of stuff, more like a precursor, to the kinds of online journals and magazines we are seeing these days. So Dickens was hugely involved with these magazines and very passionate about writing for these magazines. Many of his famous works, including Hard Times, were serialized for these magazines, and I'm going to name a few of these weekly magazines that Dickens had started. Some of the notable weekly magazines written and edited by him include Master Humphrey's Clock, Household Words, and All the Year Round. Of these three names, Household Words and All the Year Round were pretty famous magazines of those times, and you would actually find a lot of articles on the internet, talking about these magazines and talking about Dickens' magazine journalism and giving you illustrations from these magazines. Now, these magazines, edited and written by Dickens, certainly contributed to the development of his unique writing style, we can say. And overall, Dickens' journalistic experience, I would say, also probably contributed a lot to his writing style, because, like I said, his initial writing journey began with the parliamentary reporting, and as a journalist, the way he was observing the city life, the way he was observing the streets and chronicling the affairs of the city people, all that probably had a bearing on his consciousness and the way he portrayed the lives of the English working class. I also think that as a parliamentary reporter, Dickens probably saw a lot of contradictions between what he was expected to report as parliamentary reportage and the real social realities of the English working class. So he probably, found a lot of contrast between these two things, between these two different ends of the spectrum, which was absolutely farcical, and probably that's something that might have led him to adopt the form of satire in his novels to portray the realities of the English working class. I think it's always interesting to, analyze the connection between two different facets of a writer's personality, whether, the other roles that they undertake, whether it's journalism or music or visual arts. I think other facets of a writer's personality contribute deeply towards their writing, and this is an area which we need to explore, and a lot more research is required in this area. So this was the first episode in which we talked about the world-famous author Charles Dickens, and I explained you his journalism background. So guys, thank you so much for listening. This is it for today. If you like the content, please do press the like button, and please do share the videos, and please do subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.